Senator West.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Members, if the Legislative Budget Board means anything to us, obviously we end up getting a fiscal note from them. On April the 5th, 2019, our Legislative Budget Board, in consultation with the Comptroller of Public Accounts, said the following. Joint resolution strikes natural persons from Section 1C of Article 8 of the Texas Constitution. It also adds Section 24, stating that the legislature may not impose a net income tax on individuals, which all of us agree. The term individuals is not defined and could be interpreted to include entities that are currently subject to the state franchise tax. To the extent that the joint resolution might exempt some entities from the franchise tax, there could be a loss to state revenue because such a determination would depend on potential future legal decisions. That means litigation. The effect of the joint resolution on state revenues cannot be estimated. So, given LBB, which all of us utilize in order to get information that we use in our deliberative process, I thought you ought to have that information before you voted on this. And so returning the language to natural persons, including natural persons, would bring clarity to exactly what we're attempting to do. What we're attempting to do, and you would get more support for this HJR, is to make certain that there's clarity in terms of what individual actually means, necessarily making certain we return it to natural persons, and then that would bring clarity to the bill itself, the HJR itself. I move adoption of the amendment.
Senator Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. President. As we discussed earlier, this amendment's not required because individual is synonymous with natural person, and this is a very good piece of legislation. And it also, if we pass it today without any changes, it would succeed and clearly go to the governor's desk for signature. If we make any changes, we go to conference. We have a time issue, and it's unfortunate because this great piece of legislation would be in peril. So I'm inclined to not accept the amendment and urge the members to vote no.
Secretary will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Senator Hinojosa.
I had my light on.
I'm sorry, Senator Hinojosa, forgive me. For what purpose?
Well, I was going to ask Senator West, the author of the amendment,
Yes.
a question for the yield.
You're recognized. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator West, do you yield?
I do.
And Senator West, and I agree with your analysis, even if we look at common law jurisprudence, a natural person is an individual human being as opposed to a legal person, which may be any type of entity, even a corporation, under United States Supreme Court rulings.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I know the author of the bill says that the intent is to prohibit an income tax on a human being, an individual, but that's legislative intent. And as we know, the Texas Supreme Court has ignored that in the past, that our legislative intent really doesn't have any more meaning anymore on some of the rulings that recently I've seen come from the Texas Supreme Court. So the way to make sure that we are trying to prohibit state income tax on a person, natural person, is to adopt your amendment.
That's exactly right, and that's the whole purpose of this particular amendment. I'd vote for the HJR with that. And it's just amazing to me that what we are attempting to do is to make certain we don't have a state income tax on an individual, which is a natural person. But this particular legislation brings confusion and lack of clarity by putting in individual, which we've spent probably the last hour talking about, that it could also individual could also mean a business entity, which is not the purpose of, stated purpose at least, of Senator Fallon.
And as I read the bill, it doesn't define what an individual is.
Exactly.
And the concerns have been expressed not just by members here in the Senate floor, but also by the LBB, by the Comptroller's Office.
Right, agencies that we historically, Senator Nelson depends upon the LBB's numbers to run our budget. We also get information from the Comptroller's Office to run our budget. And each of us do fiscal analysis with get fiscal analysis from the Comptroller's Office. Both of those one legislative entity, and the comptroller's office is basically saying this is ill-advised. So, so if our colleagues want to vote for it, they have the right to do it.
I'll vote for the bill, the HJR 38, this amendment gets on. Thank you, Senator West.
Thank you.